The much talked about but apparently little understood Green Deal is due to be launched in October 2012. The initiative will see millions of pounds provided by the private sector to make properties more energy efficient. The cost of the works will be paid back by the electricity bill via the savings made on the building's energy bills. In this programme, we will look at how the Green Deal will work in practice and identify opportunities that the Green Deal may offer architects and other construction professionals. And to help us steer through the morass of information and supposition, I'm delighted to welcome Andrew Mellor, partner at PRP Architects. So, Andrew, can you just first of all fill us in on the kind of proportion of CO2 that's reputed to come from leaky buildings in this country?
Of course, currently in the UK, it's 40% of the total UK CO2 emissions.
And is that operational, or is that including transport and construction?
That's operational emissions.
Is that right? So in a more highly industrialised economy, like the UK was maybe in the 70s, it wouldn't have been such a high percentage?
Probably, yes.
Yeah, okay. So how does it break down between domestic and non-domestic buildings then?
Of that 40%, about 55% will be residential, domestic, and the further 45% will be non-residential.
And that's when it's that's all residential. So you can have some very leaky residential buildings and some,
Absolutely, that'll include relatively newly built new build, which will have very little CO2 emissions because they're built to very high performance standards, and those Victorian or Georgian buildings which are very leaky.
Okay, and the Green Deal, which we'll try to explain in a moment, applies to all building types across all sectors, is that right?
It applies to all sectors, yeah, and in fact Greg Barker, the Climate Change Minister, made that exact statement at the recent UKGBC, UK Green Building Council workshop on the Green Deal.
Okay, so when you're talking about retrofit, which is what this is all about,
yep.
What kind of type of work are we talking about?
Retrofit is a new term, and it really applies to refurbishment with energy efficiency or energy generation measures added to that typical refurbishment works. Under the Green Deal, it's very likely that it'll be simple insulation measures. It will be cavity wall or loft insulation or draft stripping. There may be other works such as windows. In fact, all works are included in the Green Deal. It's just whether they'll be fundable under the funding mechanisms.
So how many buildings are we talking about that don't have cavity wall insulation or?
I think it is 13 million without cavity wall, and
13 or 30?
13 million,
okay.
Without cavity wall, and 6 million without loft insulation.
So is there any kind of information that architects should swat up on to kind of understand the opportunities for retrofit?
Sure, there are the recently published Green Deal guidance documentation and consultation documents, of which there are 26, 2 of which are over 300 pages long, and that will be a great starting point to understand installation process and how the funding mechanisms work. The Technology Strategy Board also had a programme of retrofit projects which many architectural practices were involved in. There were 86 altogether, and each of those reduced CO2 emissions from one single dwelling or maybe a pair of dwellings by 80%. By far greater reduction than will be seen in the Green Deal, certainly. There's also the recently published BSI Building Standards document, PAS 2030, which actually looks at the installation process. That's a publicly available specification document, so it will apply both to the consumer as well as the installers and the providers of the Green Deal.
So, apart from finding out what the CO2 emissions were in the production of all those 300-page documents,
yes,
which will be an interesting audit, you mentioned retrofit for the future schemes. Can you just explain what they are?
Yes, each of those is a single dwelling or maybe a pair of dwellings or a small group of dwellings which was social housing. It was social tenure as opposed to private tenure. And each of those had to reduce emissions by 80% over a baseline that was set by a Technology Strategy Board. This was a government-funded initiative, and this will be a heavy retrofit. So it will be high levels of insulation, it will be ventilation systems, renewable technologies on the roof or in the basement and such. So these buildings have been completely wrapped in insulation, triple glazed windows, some to very, very high standards of performance.
And you've been involved in some of those?
We were involved in 5 of those, yeah.
And have they been audited?
All those projects have been monitored for 2 years after completion, and each of that monitoring performance data sets can be actually seen on the Technology Strategy Board website, and it's actually live monitoring.
Okay, very good. Well, the cornerstone to the Green Deal is the Golden Rule. The Golden Rule says the cost of energy savings measures must not exceed the cost of savings based on an average bill for the duration of the loan, for which could be up to 25 years. For example, if energy savings are calculated at £400 a year, over a 25-year period, the total cost of the retrofit must not have exceeded £10,000. However, when QS firm Cyril Sweet modelled energy efficiency improvements to a primary school, office, industrial unit and a retail warehouse, it revealed that the costs would be significantly more than any savings made in reduced energy bills. Cyril Sweet concluded that the Green Deal in its current form would only work for, quotes, very poorly performing buildings and the lowest of low-hanging fruit. Quite damning, don't you think?
It's probably likely to be the case, actually, and it will certainly, the Green Deal will only fund cavity wall, loft insulation and draft stripping, certainly to homes. In the consultation document for commercial, it refers to the fact that the software will underestimate the savings, and that the Green Deal provider and the customer must agree that they will be the case for the first year, but they can negotiate for the years following that if it shows there will be increased savings, that actually the payments will be more, so they can get additional benefits, greater extent of measures installed.
So the software will underestimate the savings?
That's correct. That's what the consultation document says.
That's what they tell you?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, regarding domestic properties, the Energy Savings Trust estimates that 85% of homes in Environmental Performance Certificate bands F and G, denoting least efficiency, can be upgraded to an E band for less than £5,000. But the rest they expect to be nearer £10,000. So even those domestic figures kind of sound a lot of money. So is it the fact that most of these savings will be found in simple, cheap loft improvements or whatever?
I think in that case you're talking about that £5,000, we're talking about a new boiler installation, a new heating system, could easily make you jump an EPC band. Insulation measures, if it's loft and cavity, you could do that as well, but you wouldn't want to pay £5,000 for loft insulation and cavity wall insulation, you'd be paying far less than that. So I think we're going to see Green Deal providers, as they will be called, offering other solutions as well, and they'll be offering perhaps kitchens installations as well, maybe PV on the roof with the feed-in tariff as a mix. So we're going to get different packages coming forward.
Right, and the savings, I understand, are based on the cost of fuel at the time of completion of the works.
That's correct, at year one, yeah. And in the consultation document also refers to inflation and the level of inflation that a Green Deal provider could apply over the term of that measure and their payback term, which could be up to 25 years.
So just as an accountancy issue, if the cost of fuel goes up, does that mean it looks as if more savings are being made as time goes on?
No, because the payback will inflate as well. The cost you're paying back will inflate as well.
Right. Okay.
But given that the estimation is that energy costs will rise between 60 and 70% in the next 8 years, then we need to appreciate that as well in the calculations.
Right. So even this has been a kind of a moving goalpost, the Green Deal, for quite a while.
Sure.
It's meant to kick off in 2012.
Yep.
So what's the kind of the opportunities for architects and construction professionals in all this?
I think certainly for architects who are multi-skilled, who understand energy and building physics, there will be opportunities. For those that don't, there's the opportunity to also retrain in energy. To be a Green Deal assessor, you will have to be energy qualified. You'll have to have SAP, RDSAP or SBEM. They're the building regulations energy modelling systems. But also you'll have to train as a Green Deal assessor, and the Green Deal assessor training is lifestyle training about building occupancy. So it's an uplift from energy training. But I think we think very importantly that architects will have a big role in this, or should have, because they understand insulation, they understand building physics, construction typologies, layouts of buildings, and adding value to building projects as well.
And what do you say, lifestyle training?
Lifestyle training,
What's
yes.
that?
So that's understanding how the occupant of the building lives. So rather than just saying this is the predicted energy performance, if it's a young couple and they're out partying all night in the winter months, then perhaps they don't use very much heating. But if it's an older couple or a family, they're using a lot of hot water or a lot of heating, it's understanding that and building that into the modelling when you make the assessment.
On the understanding what, that they shouldn't use as much heating?
That if they're using a lot of hot water, it might be beneficial to put a new insulated hot water tank in, or a solar hot water system on the roof to provide reduced cost of free hot water.
Right, and so will some of this information about where the opportunities arise come in OG notices?
It certainly will be in OG notices, and we've seen recently there's been what's called Birmingham Energy Savers 3, which is 15,000 homes followed by a further 185,000 home programme, plus maybe other uses in Birmingham. There are other cities such as Coventry and Manchester that are looking at whole city approaches as well.
Right, and when you mentioned about opportunities for architects, is that encroaching on the traditional RICS territory?
I think a surveyor could undertake this job, but again, they'd have to have energy training, just like an architect would. One of my fears is, personally, is that if we start pepper potting solutions, and we're talking about external wall insulation here, particularly on the outside of houses, and you live next door to me and you did yours pink and it was a certain depth and I did mine much thinner and did it yellow, then actually we're going to start devaluing the street scene and actually maybe financially devaluing homes. On the converse, it may be a great opportunity to enhance the streetscape if we do this properly.
Yeah, so that's the thing, isn't it? Because if we're just talking about loft insulation or external walls, regardless of external wall insulation, is there much opportunities for architecture rather than just opportunities for architects on a commercial basis? Well, can you put some architecture into these?
I think certainly there'll be opportunities for the technical architects out there, perhaps less so for the design architects, but there will be lots of detailing. I think also what we've not talked about yet is the other part of the funding, which is ECO, Energy Company Obligation, which is money that will come from the energy companies to replace certain other funding mechanisms that will run out at the end of 2012, and that will pay for solid wall insulation to residential property types of all tenures, and that's where the concern will be, that we could be damaging or devaluing street scenes. So there's an opportunity certainly for architects to work there, perhaps with local authorities looking at how guidelines for conservation areas or for street scenes to provide guidance to installers and other professionals.
The government recently announced £200 million of funding to kick-start the Green Deal, but just weeks before it had also announced the slashing of feed-in tariffs designed to incentivise photovoltaic schemes. There's a little bit of a mixed message going on, isn't there? So is this kind of an indication that maybe the Green Deal is going to go the same way as the home information packs, maybe?
We certainly hope not, but I think the feed-in tariff review will certainly knock confidence in the Green Deal, and to drive confidence in this we need acceptance by industry to take this forward, otherwise people are not going to invest, whether you are an installer through training or whether you're a consumer taking up the Green Deal. And in my mind that £200 million should pay for some primer projects in terms of large-scale community retrofit to give people confidence in the Green Deal.
All right, and what about the Australian Green Deal, which I hear didn't go too well, particularly? Is there lessons to be learned?
I think the Australian version of the Green Deal was an absolute disaster, and there was one or two particular reasons for that, but unfortunately there were some deaths from the installers, and there was lots of failures in terms of the installation, and primarily that was because it was ill-considered, and that it was just the company that had to be certified, and the actual installers, the individuals, weren't certified or trained. Now the British government, the UK government has realised that and actually is putting in place through what's called the Code of Conduct that everybody involved in the Green Deal will have to be certified and quality assured.
And that's all in place, those kind of...
It's not in place. The documents were published at the end of November with all the others, but it will be in place by October 2012 when the Green Deal is launched, we are told.
That's a promise. You heard it here first. Okay, well, let's hope that it doesn't go the way of the Australian system. But before we go, maybe you can just give us a brief recap. We've gone around a lot of issues here, but maybe of some of the potential benefits, potential improvements to workloads for architects in stressed times of the Green Deal. What can we look forward to?
I think certainly architects should be speaking to Green Deal providers, to potential installers, to property holders, housing providers, to local authorities who have large residential stock who will need guidance under the Green Deal, and perhaps an end-to-end design service, an assessment service, and then a project management service, particularly important here as well. There will be opportunities with local authorities because under something called HECA, the Home Energy Conservation Act, each local authority will have to provide a Green Deal plan for its area, for its region. So there'll be an opportunity there. Also design guidance documentation around streetscapes and perhaps conservation areas that we talked about as well as detailing opportunities actually in detailing installation with suppliers or installers.
So even though you don't really want to give your competitors an advantage, can you just explain how you maybe become a Green Deal assessor?
Yeah, so you will have to have trained as an RD SAP or SAP or SBEM assessor first, and then you will undertake the Green Deal assessor training, which is a lifestyle uplift to that original training that you may already have, or that you'll gain during the next 6 to 9 months.
Okay, a lifestyle uplift training. It's a new language for me. So, but I mean, how long does this take? I mean, is this a certification process? Is it a 2-day?
I think the SAP training will be 5 days as it stands at the moment. The Green Deal assessor lifestyle training is 8 hours as we understand it at the moment, but that's not been formalised yet.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much indeed. And there we shall leave it. Many thanks, Andrew, for your excellent advice, your insider knowledge. Thank you for watching, and until next time, goodbye. Very good.